with a capital M, and I'm going to insert another entry here. So back to my references, mark an entry for my index. Now it has capital M music, and I'm going to mark all. So there's the new index entry. Notice every time you do that, it shows the Pilcrows. And if there's any place else in this document where music appears with a capital M, that was just marked as well. All right, I'm going to close this window, take a moment and catch up with me, and mark the music with a capital M. All right, now I want to talk about different types of music, and I want to make index sub-entries for that. So I'd like to scroll back up through the document, and I'd like to mark some of the subcategories of music, and this will be called a sub-entry into our index. So I'm scrolling down and eyeballing things here. It says we've got an inventory of CDs and tapes ranging from New Age, alternative rock. Not sure I'll include everything in between, but we'll at least add those two as sub-entries, and we'll put them under the capital M music, I guess. I'm going to flip a coin there. So I'm going to select New Age, and I'm going to go mark it as an entry. But I need to do a special thing to this one, and I'm afraid it's kind of clunky. And this process hasn't changed over the years. What I need New Age to be is a sub-entry under capital M music. And so I'm going to select New Age, and I wish that I could drag it down to the sub-entry box, but I can't do that. So instead, I'm going to have to cut and paste it. So I'm using Control-X to cut it. I'm going to click down in sub-entry. I'm going to use Control-V to paste it. And then in the main entry, I'm going to make that one capital M in music. Your turn to do that. So go find where it says New Age, select that, mark entry. You're going to have to cut it from main entry and paste it into sub entry. And then down at the bottom, mark all. When I close this window, I can see the new index entry next to New Age. All right, think you could do that again? Try it for alternative rock. Select that text, alternative rock, and now your mission, my impossible mission force, should you choose to accept your mission, is to mark that in as a sub-entry under capital M music. Have at it. And if you haven't already, mark all. All right, maybe for our last one, let's mark all of the occurrences of these letters CD. So you know how to do that by now. This won't be a sub-entry. This will just be a main entry. So select any version of CD anywhere in the document because we're going to mark all. Mark entry, going to be a main entry. Down at the bottom, mark all. And close that window. All right, do your thing there. Looks kind of bad when it's in the middle of a table like this, but remember this is going to be hidden. So if I go up to my Home tab and I hide the Pilcrows, yeah, so I don't actually see that index entry code. All right, everybody, it's time to see how to actually put in the index. And again, this usually happens at the end of the document. So I'm going to use my Control and End keys to go to the end of the document, where I currently already have a bibliography. Now, I could insert a page break and put in the index on that next page, but maybe I'll just put a little divider line between them. So I'm going to hit the Enter key, and I'm going to use a trick that I used in an earlier lesson, but it only took a few seconds. You may have missed it, or maybe you didn't actually take that lesson. Nice quick way to put a straight line across here is to tap the minus key 3 times. 1, 2, 3. You can actually type it more than that, but 3 is enough. And then when I hit the Enter key, it puts a nice little border across there, and I'm going to hit the Enter key again, and then this is where we'll put our index. So take just a moment and do that. Hit the Enter key at least once, and then minus, 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 Enter key, and you'll have the little divider there. And then here's where we're going to put our index of the index entries. So with my insertion point flashing where I would like the index to appear, I'm going back up to my References tab one more time, And this time, instead of mark entry, it's going to be insert index. Let's choose that one and all. Right, so this takes me to a place that shows me a little preview of it. And we don't have very many entries in it, but particularly if I have a lot of entries, I might want to leave this as its default setting for 2 columns. But if we've only got 6 or 8 different entries, 2 columns might look a little funky. So I'm going to cut that down to just 1 column. And then last but not least, I need to go down and click on OK. Pretty exciting, huh? Actually, it's not so exciting when you only got 4 or 5 of them in there. And you notice, unlike our table of contents and our bibliography, it doesn't have a little title there that says index. So you might want to add that on your own. I'm going to click to put my insertion point just above there. I'm going to hit the Enter key, and I'm going to add the word index. And I think I'd like to make it have the same look as the word bibliography. So thank goodness for the Format Painter brush. I'm going to select the word bibliography. I'm headed to my Home tab. I'm going to click on this Format Painter brush right here, and then apply that formatting to the word index. And now that's got a nice solid look to it. So finish that off, everybody. Insert your index, and then insert a label that says index, and then make it look like the words bibliography, and you are good to go. So you'll notice it has the page numbers here, and it has the sub-entries. And notice that music with a lowercase m is different than music case. And also notice that music with a lowercase m is different than music with an uppercase m, and all of that stuff that we talked about. So these are not the number of occurrences, these are the page numbers that they're found on. All right, good work, everybody. So thanks for checking out Module 5, everything about forms and inserting document references, and finish it off with bibliographies and indexes. Come on back for Module 6 when you get a chance. For the moment, this is Dan McAllister signing off, also known as Fernando, signing off for Module 5. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Welcome, or as the case may be, welcome back to the wonderful world of Word 2016 with Dan McAllister. We're going to start Module 6, which has to do with macros, customizing our toolbars, and linking within and outside of Microsoft Word. You'll need to get some practice files. If you've been following along with earlier lessons, you've already got the practice files, but we understand not everybody goes from Lesson 1 to Lesson 2 to Lesson 3. So when you download your practice files, they're going to come in a zipped folder, and you'll extract that folder, and I recommend that you put it out on the desktop. And also in earlier lessons, we created this folder out on the desktop named Finished Word Documents. So the general method is, at least usually, we'll open a file from the Word sample files, we'll doctor it up, and then we'll do a save as to drop it in the finished Word documents. And by choosing save as instead of save, you've not destroyed the original in case you'd like to go back and play with it again later. Otherwise, you'd have to download the files again. All right, assuming you have your practice files, let us now start Microsoft Word, one and all. I'm going to do that. It's just off the bottom of my screen. You won't be able to see where I'm clicking on it. So here I am having started Word, and now I'm going to go open one of our practice files. I'd like to open one named Intro Macros, please. So I'm going to head out to open that file. You're going to do the same, and when we get back together, we will start working on that document, Intro Macros. Have at it. Put your video on pause, go open that file. I'll be doing the same thing in the meantime. Very often when you open a document like this that came from a website, you might see a warning at the top of the document saying that you'll have to enable editing. And you should do that in this case. Enable editing if you see that warning. So what is a macro? Well, the word macro is Latin for larger than life. And in this case, we're talking about automating things. Back in the 60s on the Disney TV show, every once in a while they'd have episodes called Better Living Through Automation. That's what we're hoping for here, better living through automation. So for my first one, I want to talk about phone numbers. This is one that I actually use for myself. When I'm going someplace to do a training assigned by my company, Very often I will have a document that tells me where I'm supposed to go and what the phone number is and that kind of thing. And very often the phone number is just written out as a bunch of digits. I like to have the phone number look like parentheses around the area code and then a space and then the 3-digit sort of prefix and then a hyphen and then the 4-digit ending. But I don't always get the documents with it typed in that way. So I've created a little macro that I call fix phone, and I'm going to show you how to create that one. So first of all, I need some phone numbers in there. So I'm going to maybe click down here next to the second paragraph. I'm going to hit the enter key to kick it down. I'm going to hit the up arrow key, and I'm going to build a couple of imaginary phone numbers. So why don't you do the same? Kick down that second paragraph, and we'll put in a phone number, and then hit the enter key and put in another phone number. Now, it doesn't have to be the same phone number as mine, but make it a 10-digit phone number, please, with no parentheses or anything like that. We'll make the macro fix that phone number. So let's see, maybe I'm going to have one that's 666 555 1212. I'm going to hit the enter key and build in another one. 777 9898 901. Literally making one up here. So take a moment and do that, put in a couple of phone numbers, and then come on back. All right, in an earlier module, we had installed the Developer tab. But we understand that not everybody takes these modules in order. So let's take just a second to talk about how can we get the Developer tab to appear up there in the ribbon, because it's usually not turned on by default. So one of the ways to do that is to right-click anywhere in said ribbon, and on the pop-up menu that appears, there is a choice here to customize the ribbon. And that's where I'd like us to head. Customizing the ribbon. And when you first get there, on the right-hand side, you'll see all the command tabs, the Home tab, the Insert tab, the Design tab, Home, Insert, Design. And as you scroll down initially, there will be one called Developer, but it won't have a check mark initially. Mine does because I turned it on in an earlier module. Yours will be turned on if you took that earlier module. Otherwise, go ahead and give it a check mark right now, and then down at the bottom, click the Okie dokie button. And you too will now have a Developer tab just like mine. Woo woo! So get yourself a Developer tab and then come on back here. All right, let us click on the Developer tab. And over at the left-hand side, we have some stuff about macros. We have something about recording a macro. Ooh, recording a macro? You mean like a movie? Well, kind of. When you record a macro, what Word actually does is record the actions that you took and write them out in a language called Visual Basic, and it stores them in a special place that we'll see. And then later you can go back and get a list of the macros that exist in your document. I'm clicking on macros, and you can see I don't have any macros in here. Also, something I'd like to note is that you will be able to see a list of macros in all active templates and documents. That means I would be able to see a list of macros that exist in some other document as long as I have it open. That's what active means. So I'm going to close that. I'm just going to cancel or click the close button. Eventually we will have some macro names in there. So now to create our first macro, I'm going to click and put my insertion point right in front of that phone number. Now there's a couple of things that the macro recorder doesn't record. It doesn't record what you have selected before you start the macro. It doesn't record time going by. So we can turn on our macro recorder and I'll be explaining what we're doing, and then when you decide to sort of play back the macro later, it's called running the macro, you won't have to wait for that time to go by that was going by as I was discussing how we build the macro. So let's get started. You'll watch me first and then you'll try it on your own. So I'm going to go up here and click on the Record Macro button, and it pops open this dialog window where I need to answer a couple of questions before I actually start recording my macro. You'll notice it has this generic name until we say otherwise, Macro 1. Yeah, you'll usually want to give it a better name than that. We can assign a clickable button that would appear either in our Quick Access toolbar or in the ribbon itself. We can assign a keyboard shortcut, or we can actually do those things later. It also asks me where am I going to store this macro, and the default choice is to store the macro in the template upon which all new documents are built. It's called normal.dotm, and it's hidden several levels deep in the folder structure of your computer. And you can put in a little description down here. It will write that description in the macro, and that can be helpful because maybe I created the macro 6 months ago, and I'm trying to remember what the heck the thing does before I run it. So I could have a little description that would show up as well. So let me zoom out here. So basically the first thing you want to do is name your macro. And there's a couple of rules about how the name can look. The name can have letters and numbers and certain punctuation symbols, although I try to stay away from those. The underscore, for example, is a legal symbol in a name of a macro. And probably the hardest rule to remember about the name of a macro is it cannot have a space in it. You can't have a space in the name of the macro. So I'm going to call this first one fix phone with no space. Now, you're not required to capitalize the first letter of 2 words in a phrase. It's just a nice, easy way to do it. You've heard of uppercase, you've heard of lowercase. I've heard this referred to as camel case. Got these little humps in it there. Right, I'm zooming out again. So I'm naming it fix phone. I'm going to store it in that normal.dot template. I'm not going to assign a button to it yet. I'm not going to assign a keyboard shortcut to it yet. I'm going to write a little description of what it does. It adds parentheses, space, and hyphen to a straight phone number. Now, very often in my lessons, I'll say, now do this much, and then pause the video, and then we'll go on. This is not really a case where we can do that. You kind of have to do this all the way through, which means I have to demonstrate it by doing it all the way through, and I'm going to do that right now. So remember that I had my cursor, my insertion point, flashing right in front of the phone number, and now I'm going to perform the steps that I want the macro to do. It will record it, and it will write Visual Basic code. So here I go. I'm going to click on OK, and suddenly my mouse has changed. Oh, you can't see it with my zooming in software. It's supposed to look like a little cassette tape, or maybe a VHS tape. And some people look at that and they think it kind of looks like a frowny face, so sometimes we call it Mr. Sad Tape Face. So I am now about to perform the steps that I want the macro to record. That is, I'm entering a parenthesis over here. I'm hitting the right arrow key. I'm putting in the other parenthesis. I'm hitting the space bar, moving the mouse, inserting the hyphen. And that's what I want the macro to do. Fix that phone number, hence the name, fix phone. Now, a very common mistake is to forget to turn off the macro recorder. And so I've seen people record a macro and then try to play it back and it's still recording. And then later when they play it back, it runs it twice because it recorded it that way. So that begs the question, how the heck do I get it to stop recording? Well, one of the ways you might see on screen right now, it's right up here, a little blue button that says stop recording. That replaced the button that said record macro. The other place that you can stop the recording is down here towards the bottom of the screen. There's another little box down there that mimics the one at the top. And you won't be able to see it while I'm recording like this, but if I were to hover over it, it would say, a macro is recording, click here to stop the macro. I think it's easier to remember to do it up here. So I'm about to do that, stop recording. All right, ready to try it? Start out by clicking to place the insertion point in front of the phone number, and then turn on the macro recorder by clicking the record macro button. You're going to give it the name fix phone. Remember, no spaces in there. You can write a little description as to what it does, puts in the parentheses, the space, the hyphen, and then when you're ready to start, you click OK, and you'll see Mr. Sad Tape Face, and then you will perform those steps. You put in the parentheses and the space and the hyphen, and when you're all done, make sure you click on the Stop Macro button. So pause the video and go set that thing up. So I'm going to end this lesson right here, and when we come back, we'll talk about, so how do you get it to perform that macro called running the macro? Having created our first macro, I'd now like to talk about how do I make it perform that macro called running the macro. Well, our first way is going to be getting a list of the macros. And I mentioned one of the ways to do that is right up here where it says macros. Let's go click on that. And you should see a list of the macros that exist now. There's just this one called fixed phone. And our first way to run it is to select it. It's blue. And then over here at the right-hand side, there's a button that says run. But before I run it, I need to have my insertion point at the beginning of the next phone number here. So at the moment, I'm going to either cancel or click the close button. And then I'm going to place my insertion point where I need to run it. And now I'm going to go run the macro using the run button. So give me a list of the available macros. Choose the one called fixed phone. Click the run button. Bang, there it is. Parentheses, space, hyphen. Your turn, go try that. Run your macro. Make sure you put the cursor at the beginning of the phone number that needs to be fixed. And then come on back. So at the beginning of this session, I said that what it does is write Visual Basic code in the background, and by default it stores it in the template upon which all new documents are built. But I would like to show you what that code looks like for a moment. So in the upper left-hand corner, I see a button that says Visual Basic. That's the language in which this macro is written. So I'm going to go up and click on the button that says Visual Basic, and it opens up this totally separate window. Over at the left side, I can see a couple of little boxes here, properties, and the project window. And my macro is stored up here in a place called normal. That's the actual name of that template upon which all new documents are built. There's a little plus sign next to it. I'm going to click on that and it expands it. Then there's a folder here named modules. I'm going to double click on the modules folder. A little pull down appears there that says new macros. And I'm going to click on New Macros. In fact, I'm going to double click on New Macros. And it opens up this little dialog window where I can actually see the code that it wrote. Maybe I'll maximize that for a moment. So that's what I would like you to do right now, please. You were back here. I'll show you a keyboard shortcut that I just used to step between the macro editor and the actual document where I've created the macro. So in order to get there, our first way was up here in the upper left corner. We're going to click on Visual Basic. In the window that appears, you won't see this place just yet. You'll have to click on Normal. Little plus sign expands the word Normal. Little plus sign expands the word Modules. And then you'll need to double click on New Macros in order to see your code. So put the video on pause, catch up with me there, get it to show you the code here in the Visual Basic Editor, it's called. Now, as I look at the code, I notice, all right, it seems to have some name up here, sub fixed phone, and then at the bottom it says end sub. This is called a subroutine. And here's what it did with its name. And then this stuff down here in black letters is the code that it wrote. And then the stuff above it with apostrophes and green letters is the notes that we made for ourselves. So it has the name of the macro, and then here's that little note that I wrote. What does it do? It adds parentheses, space, and a hyphen to a straight phone number. And then here is the actual code. So anything with an apostrophe in front of it is called a comment. And sometimes when people are trying to fix their macro because something went wrong, they can disable a step by clicking on it and then typing an apostrophe in front of it. And then when I move down, that one turns green and it is no longer code that would be executed. That's kind of an advanced topic for this early in the day, so I'm just going to take away that apostrophe. So sometimes as you look at the code, it's kind of like English and you can sort of figure out what it does. So you can see it selected text, and then it typed some text, and the actual text that it typed was the left paren. Then it recorded me moving right. That was me hitting the right arrow key. And so I actually moved right 3 characters, and it says so right there. And then I typed in the right parenthesis, and then I moved 3 characters to the right, and then I typed the hyphen, and then I stopped the recorder. So that should be pretty much the same code that you're seeing on your screen. Now, a moment ago, you saw me quickly switch between the Visual Basic Editor window and the Word window. The keyboard shortcut for that is Alt and F11. So right now I'm going to hold the Alt key. While I'm holding it, I'm tapping F11, takes me back to Word. And that's just what we call a toggle. That is, you can use that same keystroke to jump back and forth. So I'm going to hold Alt and tap F11 again. And I find myself back in the Visual Basic Editor. So take just a second and try that. Alt F11 a couple of times, see how it just toggles back and forth. Now, if you made a mistake while you were recording the macro, and you fixed it before you end the recording, it won't show the mistake. Like if I was trying to type in the left paren, and I typed the left paren, and then I realized, oh, I needed the right paren, I could just hit the backspace key in Word while I'm recording the macro. It won't show that I put in the wrong paren and then fixed it. It'll just show the fix. It'll show the finished version. But there may be times when you need to edit this code, and we're going to talk about that in our next section. So for the moment, why don't we go back to the Word window? That would be, of course, what keyboard shortcut? Hopefully you're all saying why that would be Alt F11, Dan. So I'm doing that, Alt F11. And then I'm going to end this lesson, and when we come back, we'll do another macro here. In our next example of a macro, I'm going to imagine that once a month I get a document sent to me from some outside source, and I'm supposed to send that around to other people in my department or inside my company, but I'm supposed to sort of brand it with my name and the company slogan. And I have to do that about once a month, so why don't I record a macro? Better living through automation, after all. So I'm going to place this at the top of the document. That is, I'm going to use maybe my Control Home key to put my cursor at the top of the document. Control and Home. And then this is where I want to record my next macro. So remember, it doesn't record where the cursor is sitting when you record the macro. So take a moment and do that. Put your cursor at the beginning of the document, and then again, I have to demonstrate the entire macro. I can't really pause in the middle. Actually, I can, but you won't be able to pause in the middle and jump back and forth between the screens. So you got to watch the whole thing here. And in this one, I'm going to make a little mistake so that we could talk about a little bit of editing in the Visual Basic Macro Editor. So here I am recording my macro with a little mistake in it. So I'm going to go up here and click on the Record Macro button again. It says, what do you want to name it? This time I'm going to call it my signature. If you look closely there, you'll see that I made a mistake already. What mistake have I made? That's right, I have a space in the name, and that's not allowed. So I'm going to make that one big word. I'll probably camel case it again. My signature. All right, let's see. I also want to store this in the normal template. And then my description is going to say it adds my name, company, and slogan. Then I'm going to start recording here as I click OK. All right, here I go. So I'm typing in my name. I'm making up a company, Dancor. Our company slogan, we're the best of the best. Now I said best, but I typed bust. That's the mistake that I'm recording here. And then I'm going to hit the Enter key. It records me doing that. And so I'm ready to finish that up. What do I need to remember to do right here if I'm done recording my macro? Yes, I need to stop recording the macro. So I'm going to go up and click on the Stop Recording button. And there's my finished macro. All right, you can use your name, you can use your company name, you can use your company slogan, but make a mistake in there somewhere. Or you can do what I did. Let me zoom in on that. Dan McAllister from the newly created Dancor. And we're the best of those, supposed to be best, but I typed bust. All right, catch up with me. Put the video on pause and do that thing. Don't forget to stop recording the macro when you're done. So let's prove to ourselves that we could actually run this macro in a different document. I'm going to create a new document right now by using Control and the letter N. Why don't you do the same? Create a new document through Control, letter N. Not Control End. That would just take my cursor to the end of my document. Control N as in new. So here comes my brand new document, and I would like to run my macro. So let's see, the first way we did it was by going over to our Developer tab, and then clicking on the name Macros, to see the names of the macros that exist. Notice it alphabetizes the list, and I would like to run the My Signature macro. So I'm going to select it, and then over here I'm going to click the Run button. And there it is, including the mistake. So try that out. Make a new document, try your macro. Hopefully things are going swimmingly with the built-in mistake. And then we'll talk about how do we go in and fix that mistake. So I need to switch from this document to the Visual Basic Editor. And you must remember our keyboard shortcut by now, Alt and F11, which is what I'm doing right now, Alt F11. So here's the Fix Phone macro code. Here's the new My Signature code, including the mistake. We're the best of the bust. That's not going to impress anybody that we're the best of the bust. We want to say we're the best of the best. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to fix that bust to make it say best. So I would like you to go to the Visual Basic Editor and fix whatever mistake you made. Put the video on pause, go ahead and fix that, and then come on back. Now, eventually we're going to need to save this, and there is actually a save button here in the Visual Basic Editor, but in fact the macros will be saved with the document. But there is a special thing we're going to need to talk about saving a document with macros in it, and that will be in the next lesson. So for the moment, having fixed the mistake, let's use our Alt F11 to go back to our document. Maybe hit the Enter key, leave a little gap, and then run that macro again. Do you remember how? You're going to go to the list of macros. You're going to choose the one called My Signature. You're going to click the Run button, and it should run it for you. I'm going to do that right now. Macros list, My Signature, run it. There it is, and now I'm the best of the best instead of the best of the bust. So run your macro now. The one that you fixed, you should see the fix happening. Happy, happy, joy, joy. And I'm going to end this session, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the saving process for saving a document that has macros in it. So why don't we take a moment and switch back to the document that we were using when we recorded the macro. So I'm about to do that. I'm going to go back to my Intro to Macros document. And I'd like you to do the same. Take a moment and switch back to that document. You can do it a couple of ways, by the way. You could go up here to the View tab and choose to switch windows, and it'll show you what documents you have open. The second one we created and not named, it's got the generic name, Document 1, and then you would be able to switch back to your Intro to Macros that way. All right, I'm going to stop right there for the moment, and when we come back in our next lesson, we're going to talk about how can you save this as a macro-enabled document. In our previous lessons, we have recorded 2 macros, and we have chosen to store them in the template for all new documents. Now this thing that I'm about to do is only required if I had made a different choice. That is, if I had chosen to store the macro in the document that I was working on when I recorded it. That happens probably more often in Excel than it does in Word, but let's imagine that that's happened, and now I need to save this document as something called a macro-enabled document. And that's because if I have stored my macros in this document and I don't save it as macro-enabled, I will lose my macros, and that would be a nasty thing. So again, let me reiterate, it's not really required for this document because I didn't store the macro in the document, but let's imagine that I had, and I want to talk about how do I save a document as macro-enabled. So I'm going to go up and choose File and Save As, because I don't want to put it in the place of my practice file. So I'm going to choose Save As. I'm going to browse for where to put it. I want to put it in my Finished Lessons folder. And then right now down here, you can see it's ready to save this thing as Word document. But this is what's called a list box. I've got a list arrow in there. So if I click in that box, I see a whole bunch of other choices, one of which is the one that I want, Word macro-enabled document. I don't need to make it a macro-enabled template. I need to save it as a macro-enabled document. Now, I don't know if you see the 4-letter extensions on your screen. That's not really a Word thing. It's a Windows operating system thing. But if you can, you would notice this one is going to end in .docm, M for macro, instead of docx. So that's the choice I'm going to make, storing this as a macro-enabled document. And then last but not least, just one last check to make sure it's going to be macro-enabled. I click Save. So in this case, it says it's going to be upgraded to the newest file format. That doesn't really have anything to do with the macros themselves, but you're going to see that happen. And click OK, and you have created a macro-enabled document. So pause the video. Make yourself a macro-enabled document. How's that for a nice short lesson? In our next session, I'm going to get a little bit fancier with my macro. For my next trick, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to pull a rabbit out of my top hat. Oops, left my top hat. Sometimes it seems like magic when you're doing macros, but it's not. So I've mentioned in an earlier session that it doesn't record what you have selected as you begin recording your macro. And in this case, what I want it to do is create something called a pull quote. And you've seen these in magazine articles, you just didn't know they were called pull quotes. It's some featured part of the article, and it looks different than the rest of the article. And so in this case, I want to make a particular paragraph look different than the others. Maybe I'll scroll down and do it to this one that's coming right after the phone numbers. And remember, I can't start building this thing and then say, hey, now you try that part of it, and then we come back in the middle of making the macro. I have to do it all at once. But let me talk about what I want it to do. So what I would like it to do is make both ends of this paragraph nice and smooth. Now, right now, if I go to the Home tab, I can see these alignment buttons in the paragraph group. Left align the paragraph. It would look like this with a nice smooth left edge, but jagged right edge. And in fact, that's what I've got right now. Nice smooth edge, jagged right edge. If, on the other hand, I were to click the centering button, then it will center every line between the margins, but then I'll have jagged edges on both sides. If I choose to right align it, I'll have a nice smooth edge on the right, but jagged on the left. This fourth button here is called Justify, and it will make it look just like that little picture looks, nice smooth edges on both sides. So that'll be part of what I want my macro to do. Then I'll also want it to indent both sides 1/2 inch, and then I'd like to wrap a little box around it called a border. So that is the magic that my macro is going to perform. Also, a little bit more magic this time, I'm going to assign a keyboard shortcut to the macro. So the next time I want to run it, I'm not going to have to stop doing whatever I'm doing, go to the Developer tab, get a list of the macros, choose one, and then run it. I'll be able to run it by a keyboard shortcut that I will assign as I'm recording it. By the way, you can also assign the keyboard shortcut later, but it's nice to do it while you're recording it. So I'm about to turn on the macro recorder, but before I do that, I want to select the paragraph that I'd like to turn into my pull quote. And I promise I'll wrap a little bow around this at the end. I'll remind you of everything that I did before it's your turn to do it. So I have pre-selected my text. It's time to start recording. So I go to my Developer tab. I click on the Record Macro button. I get to give it a name. I'm going to call it Pull Quote. But if I continue from there, I'm going to have problems. Anybody see the mistake that I've just made? You may remember you're not allowed to have a space in the name of your macro. So I got to take the space out of there. I'll call it pull quote. I'll use the camel case capital letters there. By the way, this would be a legal character, the underscore, the character that you get when you hold the shift key and tap the hyphen. So it kind of looks like a space, but it's not. That would be legal. I'll see people that like to do that. I'm just going to go with the camel case version. And I said I was going to assign a keyboard shortcut to it. I can do that by clicking this button. However, if I do that right now, it won't let me get back into this window to assign my description. So instead, I'm going to put in the description first, and then I'll assign the keyboard shortcut. And I'm not going to make you watch me type the description. I'll pause the video for a second myself. I'll fill that in, and it will look like it appears by magic. All right, now I can assign my keyboard shortcut. By the way, there's a way to do that later, but it's kind of nice to do it while you're recording the macro. So I'm going to click, having filled in the name and filled in the description, and deciding that I'm going to store it in the template for all new documents from now on. By the way, that doesn't make this macro available in old documents I've created, only new ones. So here I am assigning my keyboard shortcut. Opens up a lovely dialog window here with a cursor flashing in a box that says press the new shortcut key. By the way, above there it says the name of the macro that I'm running and the fact that it's being stored in the file name normal.dotm. That is that template for all new documents. So my keyboard shortcut, I could, for example, assign Control P for pull quote. But that's probably raising a question in your head right now. What does Control P usually do? Yes, it's the keyboard shortcut for print. So if I stored this macro in my current document, then I would only be affecting this document. But since I'm storing it in the file name normal.dotm, then Control P would suddenly run my macro instead of printing the document. So I'm going to try to pick a keyboard shortcut that I don't already use for other things. And it can be kind of difficult to find a keyboard shortcut that's not already assigned to something. So let's see, I'm going to use the backspace key to take that one out, and instead I'm going to use Control and Shift and P. All right, so that one is actually already assigned to something. It tells me that right down here. It's currently assigned to font size select. But I never happen to use Control Shift P to select a font size. I just go to one of the toolbars and choose the font size. So in my case, Control Shift P will make a dandy keyboard shortcut. And then one more thing I have to do down here in the bottom left corner, I need to assign that. So having assigned it, it now says, all right, current keyboard shortcut for this is Control and Shift and P. And now when I click close, here comes Mr. Sad Tape Face. I am now actually recording the macro. So I'm going to do those things that I was talking about. Let's see, I'm going to go to the Home tab. I'm going to apply the justified alignment. There we go, nice smooth edges on both ends of the paragraph. Now I'm going to indent it a ½ inch from both sides. That's most easily done by going here in the paragraph group and clicking on this lovely dialog launcher, where I can then set the indentation on the left and on the right. So let's see, I want that to be ½ inch on the left, ½ inch on the right. Stand up, sit down, fight, fight, fight. And then I'm going to OK that. And so there's my justified indented paragraph. And then the last thing I said I was going to do was wrap a little border around that. And in my paragraph group, there is this button right here for borders. And I'm going to click the pull down arrow next to it. And I'm going to choose the one that says outside border. And there's the border around the outside of that thing. All right, before I move on, if that's the last thing I want the macro to do, anybody remember what I need to do right now? Yes, that would be to get rid of Mr. Sad Tape Face by stop recording. So one of the ways to do that is down here on my status bar. There's a button that says a macro is currently recording. You can't actually see it saying that as I do it on screen because the little note is off screen at the bottom. So instead, the other way to do it, and probably the way that's easiest for everybody to remember, is I'm going to go back to my developer tab where the button that used to say record macro now says stop recording. And I click on that, and I have stopped recording, and then I can feel free to click anywhere I want, and there is my pull quote. Now again, I don't really expect you to remember all of those steps, so let me just kind of remind you of what they were in a relatively quick fashion. I had selected the paragraph, and with it selected, I turned on the macro recorder. I gave it a name, pull quote, no space. I gave it a description. What it does, let's see, it justifies both sides of a paragraph, indents it a ½ inch, and wraps a border around it. And having filled that in, I then clicked on keyboard, and I assigned the keyboard shortcut Control Shift P. I then had to click the assign button in the lower left corner of that window, and then I was able to close that window, and I started recording. And once I was starting to record, I went to the Home tab. Let me just back out of here for a second. I went to the Home tab while I was recording. I applied the justified format. I went to the dialog launcher where I indented a ½ inch from both sides and clicked OK, and then wrapped a border around it with this pull down arrow, the outside border. So I would like you to do that right now. Put the video on pause and create that macro, everybody. Don't forget to stop recording when you're done. All right, welcome back. So now I would like to try to run my macro on another paragraph. So I'm going to go pre-select that paragraph. And what was our keyboard shortcut that we assigned? Anybody remember? I'm hoping you do. It's Control, Shift, and P. So instead of having to go to the Developer tab, go find the name of the macro, and click the Run button, I'm simply going to tap right now Control and Shift, and P for pull quote. And there it is. Indented, justified, and wrapped with a border. All right, you try that. Remember, you have to pre-select the paragraph, and then try your keyboard shortcut, Control, Shift, and P. In our next session, we're going to talk about how we could assign a button to click on, maybe up in our Quick Access toolbar at the top. So come on back for that next lesson, everybody. Hope you're having some geeky fun along the way. Better living through automation. Thus far, we have two ways to run our macros. Either by going to the Developer tab, getting a list of the available macros, and then clicking the Run button. That was method number 1. Method number 2 was assigning a keyboard shortcut, and I had mentioned that that can be done after you record it. Let me just show you for a second how that would happen. I could right-click in my ribbon, I could say I want to customize the ribbon, and then down here at the bottom there's a thing about customizing keyboard shortcuts. And if I click on that Customize button, then I can go in and assign keyboard shortcuts to pretty much anything, not just macros. But I digress. So instead, what I want to do is add a keyboard shortcut for this macro up into this area at the top called the Quick Access Toolbar. So one of the ways I can do that is to go up and click on this little pull-down arrow at the end of the Quick Access Toolbar, and then slide down here to the bottom where it says More Commands. So why don't you do that with me? The right side arrow on your Quick Access Toolbar, and then look for More Commands. That'll take you to this window right here. All right, so now what I need to do is find a list of my macros. Now as I scroll up and down in this list right here, I sometimes see a thing about macro. I'm not seeing it right there, but even that would not actually let me do what I want. So in order to get a list of my macros, I'm noticing up here at the top it says this is simply a list of the most popular commands. My little joke is these are the commands that were the quarterback and the cheerleaders in high school. Those are the popular commands. What I would rather see is all the commands. So I'm going to go up and click on this little list arrow in the list box. And in fact, I don't need to see all the commands, although that's a choice. Really what I want to see is a list of my macros. So I'm going to click on macros, and here they are. So I've got my fix phone macro, I got my signature macro, I got my pull quote macro. Maybe I would like to create a button that would run my signature macro. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to move it over to the right-hand side, which currently has my save, undo, redo, and my touch mouse mode that we did in an earlier lesson. So I click on the one named Normal, because that's where it's stored. My signature, I click on it, and then I point at this Add button, and I click on that. It pops it over here to the right-hand side. And when I click on OK, I have a lovely new button right up there. And so I'm going to try it out maybe at the bottom of this document. And here's where I want my signature to appear. So I'm going to go click on that new button, and there comes my signature. Hey, having some fun now. So go ahead and do that. You're going to go up here and click on the pull-down arrow at the right of the Quick Access Toolbar. You're going to look for More Commands. You're going to say, I don't want to see the popular commands. I want to see a list of my macros. Choose the one that's your signature. Add it to the right-hand side. Click on OK down at the bottom. And then move your cursor down to the end of the document, maybe by using the Control End keyboard shortcut, and then try clicking on the button. Click the button and have it run your macro. In our previous lesson, we customized the Quick Access Toolbar, adding a button up here that would run our macro. And I could do that over and over again to add more buttons to add more of those macros, but all of those icons would look the same. There was no way that we could change the icon. And under those conditions, I have to go up here and actually hover over the little icon to figure out which macro I'm going to run if I had 3 of them sitting next to each other. So starting with 2007, you could customize the Quick Access Toolbar, but not the ribbon. Starting with 2010, you can actually make groups of buttons in the ribbon. So the structure of the ribbon here is the command tabs, and then inside the command tabs, produce ribbons. And then the ribbons are broken up into groups of buttons. For example, under the Layout tab, I have the Page Setup group. I have the Paragraph group. So that's just the names of things. Tabs, groups, with buttons. Now sometimes as I look at choices in the ribbon, for example, if I go over here and click on the Insert tab, then depending on the screen resolution, I might see several buttons in a group, or I might just see the name of the group and a pull-down list. For example, if you go to your Insert tab, you can probably see these choices about things that you can insert for pages without having to click on the little pull-down arrow. So this next thing I'm going to mention kind of depends on the screen resolution. You can see that when it's collapsed down like this, I just get a little icon and the name of the group. That's happening over here as well. I've got an icon for links, looks like a little globe with a chain attached, and I have to click the pull down arrow to see the choices. But again, on your screen, if you have higher resolution, then you would actually be able to see these choices without having to click on them. I mention that because of a thing that's going to happen in this lesson. So in this case, what I want to do is actually customize the ribbon itself. I would like to add a tab up here with my name on it. And then inside that tab, I would like to create my own groups of buttons. And maybe I'll have one button in a group for each of my macros. And I should actually be able to see the names of the macros without having to go up and hover over this button like I put it up in my Quick Access toolbar. So that's where we're headed right now. We're going to customize our ribbon. We're going to create a new command tab with our name on it. We're going to create our own groups. We're going to create our own buttons in there. And at first, we'll do it for our macros. So here I go. I'm going to right-click anywhere in the ribbon, and I get a little pop-up menu. And one of the choices in the pop-up menu is to customize the ribbon, and that's where I'm headed right now. So I'm right-clicking literally anywhere in the ribbon, and I'm left-clicking on Customize the Ribbon. And that takes me to this window, which we have seen one time before. The last time we were in this window, we were in here turning on the Developer tab. So what we're going to do is create a tab for ourselves. So I've got the Home tab, the Insert tab, Home tab, Insert tab. As I expand the Insert tab, I can see these groups called Pages and Tables and Illustrations. Pages group, Tables group, Illustrations group. And then we'll add buttons to those. So we're going to customize things, making some nice, robust, usable groups here. And that way, we'll start out by making one that holds buttons for our several macros. So why don't you do what I've done so far? I right-clicked anywhere in the ribbon, and then I left-click on Customize the Ribbon, and that takes you to this window. So put the video on pause, come join me. All right, next thing I want to do is add my own command tab, or just referred to as tabs here. And as I look towards the bottom of this window, I actually see a button labeled New Tab. I'm going to go click on that, and it produces a new tab named New Tab. And it throws in a group at no extra charge. So I think I'd like to say something better than New Tab. So one of the ways I can rename this tab is to click on it to turn it to blue, and then down right below here, I see a choice about Rename. And that's what I'm going to click on right now. Rename that selected tab, and I'm going to put my name on it. Dan. By the way, you are allowed to have spaces in the name of the command tabs. It's not like a macro where you can't have a space in there. So I'm going to call it the Dan tab, and I click OK. And then right below the Dan tab, I've got a group called New Group, and I'd like to rename that as well. Now, I could do it the same way. I could click on it and then click Rename, but I think I've said in my earlier lessons that I'm a big fan of the right-click. So that's how I'm going to do this one. I'm going to point at New Group and right-click, and on the pop-up menu that appears, I'm going to choose to rename it. And I see a bunch of little icons. These icons will only appear when you have low resolution screen setting, so that all you can see is the name of the group and not the actual buttons. And you can't really modify these, you can only choose from this finite list here. So I'm flipping a coin, I'm going to go for the smiley face. You can feel free to choose anyone you want. And then I want to give this a better name than New Group. Maybe this will be named My Macros. Again, I'm allowed to have spaces in the names of the tabs and the names of the groups. So that's what I would like you to do so far. We had to create a new tab here. We renamed it either by left-clicking and clicking the Rename button or by right-clicking and renaming it. And then we renamed the group and assigned some little icon to it. So catch up with me there. Pause that video. Make a new tab, make a new group, and rename them appropriately. So I've created a new tab. I've created a new group. Now it's time to put stuff in that group. So over at the left side, I don't need to just see the popular commands. I would like to see maybe my macros again. So I'm going to click on the list box here that says popular commands, and I'm going to say show me my macros. So there's my pull quote macro, my signature macro, my fixed phone macro. And this time, instead of clicking and then adding, I'm actually going to literally drag them over here and drop them under the group name My Macros. I wish that I could click on one and then shift click on the third one and get them all at the same time. That works in a lot of places in Word, but not here. So in this case, I have to do them one at a time. So I'm grabbing the one named pull quote, I'm dragging. Now at first it looks like I'm doing something illegal. I'm getting the Ghostbuster slash, but I'm just going to be nice and brave and keep dragging. And then I can see a little horizontal line here, and I'm going to drop it right under my group name, My Macros. And then I'm going to do that 2 more times. My signature is going to drop under there. My fixed phone is going to drop under there. And when I click on OK, I'll be able to see that I've got my own tab up there. And when I click on my tab, I see the group called My Macros, and I can actually see the names of the macros up there without having to hover over them, which is what I had to do for this little one up in my Quick Access toolbar. All right, so it is your turn to customize your ribbon. Remember how we did that? We started anywhere in the ribbon with a right click, customize the ribbon. I believe you have already added a new tab and a new group. So what you need to do now is over here where it says popular commands, get it to show you your macros, and then drag them under the group. When you're done, click OK, and then go click on the tab with your name, and you should be able to see your group of macro buttons. All right, are you feeling cool about this? I'm clicking on the little plus sign next to My Macros. There's the buttons I've added. All right, I'm going to OK that. And then it's time to try out one of my buttons here. So maybe I would like to do the My Signature macro. Or maybe I've got a phone number and I'd like to try the fixed phone. I think I'll go with that one. So first of all, I'm going to invent a phone number here, 333-444-5555. I'm going to click to put my cursor in front of that phone number. And then I'm going to run my fixed phone macro by clicking on the button. And there it is, running my macro. All right, your turn. So by now you should have the buttons up in the group that's in the tab. And then make a phone number and then click to put your cursor at the beginning of it and run your macro by the button instead of by the keyboard shortcut. And again, I hope you're having some fun, but more importantly, I hope you're thinking about the things that you might want to automate in the kind of business that you do. It's fine to look at me make something. What you've been doing here is kind of learning the general process and learning how it writes the code in the Visual Basic Editor, and then how we can assign keyboard shortcuts and how we can assign buttons to run our macros. In our previous lesson, we customized our ribbon. We right-clicked in the ribbon, we added a new command tab, it came with a new group, we renamed the tab, we renamed the group as My Macros, we added buttons, and the buttons work, we've tested them out, but they sure look funky. Wouldn't it be nice if we could rename the buttons just like we have renamed the tabs and the groups, and that's what we're going to do right now in a nice short lesson. So let's go back and customize the ribbon again. You can right-click anywhere in the ribbon, and on the pop-up menu, customize the ribbon. And I don't see the buttons in the group called My Macros until I click on the little plus sign next to My Macros. And that will expand the list. And then I'm going to right-click on the first of the buttons and rename it. And then right in here, I'm going to get rid of the normal.newMacros. And just leave the pull quote part. So that's what I'm about to do right now. I'm selecting that other stuff that I want to get rid of, deleting it, okaying it. So that'll rename the button. Why don't you do that to all 3 of those buttons? You have to do them one at a time. And while you're pausing the video and doing that, I'll be doing that at the same time. So pause the video and practice renaming those buttons, please. So you should show the new names in there right now. And when you click on OK, hey, they look a whole lot nicer up here in the ribbon. But let's make sure that they still work. So I'm going to use Control-End key to get to the end of my document, where I'm going to put in a fake phone number here, 333-444-5555. Remember, for our fixed phone, you need to have the cursor at the beginning of the phone number, so I'm going to set that up correctly. And now I'm going to go use my fixed phone button, and it works just fine with the new name, and it sure looks a lot better up in my ribbon. So that was how to create our own tab, our own group of buttons.